The honourable member for the Yukon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it's a pleasure to rise today and speak about Bill C-26. I've heard a number of my colleagues speak on both sides of the House, and it's at the risk of repeating some of the things that we've heard today. I want to highlight some of the things that will be unique to this bill that I think are going to be great for Canadians. From a perspective of a person who represents a vast and rural riding in the Yukon Territory, we see geographical gaps in terms of our ability to police and have police officers everywhere in such a vast riding. And that's no different across rural Canada in general. And when we have crimes that are going on and citizens immediately available to act on those, it's a tremendous shame that people that do, and as one of my colleagues pointed out, these heroes that step forward and protect Canadians, protect property, and do what's right, find themselves actually on the opposite side of the law. And this bill seeks to clarify the times when a person acts and when they act as a hero and step forward and do what's right to prevent crimes, that we make sure that they're not punished for those responsible measures, those responsible steps that they take as a Canadian citizen. And when we notice, when we see there's a number of programs across Canada where we already celebrate the role citizens play in crime prevention. Programs like Crime Stoppers, programs like Neighborhood Watch, Citizens on Patrol. All of these programs are examples where we're encouraging the average Canadian, the average citizen, day to day, to become the eyes and the ears for Canadian police. And certainly without their assistance, police officers would have a very difficult time doing their jobs, completing the tasks that they need to do, given the responsibilities they have, the vast distances that they need to travel, some of the limited resources that they have in certain regions of our country. So they rely heavily on these exceptional programs. And we see advertisements in Canadian newspapers that talk that provide Crime Stoppers tips, and they're asking for Canadians' help. They publish pictures of people that are wanted for various offenses. And when they do that, obviously, they're asking for public's assistance from the perspective of not necessarily going out and looking for these people, but to be able to observe, record, report what they see, and try and get the police to that situation as quick as possible. And that's certainly something our government is continuing to promote. And I definitely have heard that on both sides of the House today, that the word vigilante has come up, and our fear that people will all of a sudden, with this newfound authority, engage in vigilantism, that Canadians somehow don't have better things to do than run around the streets and pretend they're police officers. And I certainly don't think, with any expanded authority or protection, what might be the more appropriate term, is this is expanded protection for those people that act as heroes versus expanded authority for them to go out on these streets, on the Canadian streets, and act as police officers. That's certainly not the intention of this bill, and we're certainly encouraging all Canadians to utilize police as the first line of protection, the first line of an agency that's mandated with protecting Canadian streets and dealing with crime in our country, and that they observe, record, and report to police when they see issues of crime. But when we stand in this House a number of times and we talk, whether it's in statements by members or whether we're debating other bills and issues in the House here, I hear on both sides of the House all the time how we talk about each and every one of us wanting to stand up against bullying, how we want to stand up against impaired driving in our country, how we denounce violence against women, domestic assault, how we all, each and every one of us, say we cannot tolerate this. This bill allows the protection for people who have the skills, knowledge, ability, and at times just the courage to step forward and stop that they themselves will not become victims of an unclear body of legislation. Can you imagine any one of us walking along our community streets and hearing a cry for help, and in this current day, be concerned that your intervention, if it required physical intervention, that your intervention could wind you up being arrested when you're merely trying to do the right thing and help somebody. If you step forward to stop a bully, which we know today is one of the most effective ways to prevent bullying from occurring, is stepping up and speaking out. Can you imagine if you stepped up and spoke out, and then for that ended up in your intervention having to use a reasonable, which this bill will permit, a reasonable level of force for intervention to protect a fellow citizen? Can you imagine if you were arrested for that and charged with that? That's happened in our country. And it's such a shame, because that discourages Canadians from doing the right thing. It discourages them from stepping forward and not just being heroes, just doing what's right, what's expected, what we should do as Canadians. So it's a little ironic that we're brave and courageous here in the House to say and speak that we won't tolerate bullying, that we won't tolerate impaired driving, that we won't tolerate domestic abuse or violence against women. But we allow laws to exist on our books that will criminalize Canadians who do have the courage, skills, knowledge, and ability to step forward. When we look at our role as Canadians, even in an urban center, and I draw everybody to a marvelous book written by Amanda Ripley called The Unthinkable. And she talks about, in her book, that the number one, the first responder, the first person most likely to be involved in saving another person's life, whether you're in an urban setting or you're in a rural setting, is going to be your fellow citizen. Just the average Joe walking the streets. It doesn't matter if you're in a big city or if you're in rural Canada. And we heard a member here on this side of the House talk about fire prevention, an example. It doesn't matter if your house is burning. It doesn't matter if you've been injured and you require ambulance services, or if there's a crime right in front of you. The first person most likely to intervene or be there to do or say anything about it is not going to be the firemen. It will not be your paramedics, and it will not be your police. It will be your average Canadian citizen. Day in and day out, they're the heroes saving lives. And whether that's a fire, or whether it's a medical emergency, or whether it's a criminal offense. And what we're wanting to do is just make sure that we provide a body of legislation now that reflects the role we expect Canadians to play, want them to play, would hope they would play, without making them the criminal in this situation. And I certainly recognize concerns on both sides of this House that this may encourage vigilantism. I don't necessarily see that being the case. I don't think people are going to read this legislation or read into this legislation and think, great, I now have all this expanded authority, because, as I said, I don't necessarily see this being as expanded authority for Canadians. I see it as being the important level of protection that we need to provide them. We have sections under the criminal code that already talk about use of force and where force is justified. And when we read sections 37, everyone is justified in using force to defend himself or anyone under their protection from assault if they use no more force than is necessary to prevent that assault or repetition of it. So we have that existing. Now, what we need to do is ensure that that's clear so that we don't see the vigilantism, so that we don't see abuse of that authority. And I believe that this Act is allowing us to do that. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I will conclude and be happy to answer any questions that the honourable colleagues in this House may have of me. Thank you.